Well, we begin in Nigeria, and a relatively new armed group has been attacking the oil sector so hard that output has been cut in half and thousands of people have lost their jobs. The Niger Delta Avengers is actually threatening to reduce the country's oil production to zero. So what does the group want, and can the government win this battle? Fidelis Mbah reports from Nigeria's oil capital, Port Harcourt.
It was only a few months ago that Nigeria was Africa's largest oil producer. But that designation has now been lost after a wave of attacks that reduced oil output by a half. The attacks are led by a new militant group, the Niger Delta Avengers, and other splinter groups. The militants want all major oil companies to stop production. They are demanding a greater share of the oil resources for the region.
If the impact was not there, the destruction of pipelines were not there, then the oil and gas companies would have been able to produce even up to 2.5 to 3 million barrels per day. Let's even say 2.5 million barrels per day. So that would be more like you're looking at us actually losing about 1 million barrels per day. And it's a huge problem, and it is one of the major reasons that has taking our economy to where it is now.
The government introduced an amnesty program for repentant militants in 2009 to end years of fighting in exchange for monthly stipends and scholarships. But some former fighters have gone back to the trenches. Some of them have accused the government of insincerity, including this former militant leader I met at his hideout.
Because waiting make me to embrace amnesty, nobody buy gun from me. And they must pay, whether they like it or not.
Government representatives have made offers to oil-producing communities, but nothing has come out of it. And experts are warning of more drastic effects on the nation's economy.
So when gas facilities are shut down, are vandalized, are destroyed, and then they are shut down, power will not be generated for anybody. And when power is not generated, people are going to pay to get power to run their businesses and worsening the already terrible economic situation of people.
Because of the attacks, oil companies have laid off about 50,000 workers, and many more are likely to follow. Fidelis Mbah, TLT World, Port Harcourt, Nigeria.
Well, just before the Business 60, we were actually looking at the Niger Delta. Nigeria's oil production has been cut in half by a fairly new rebel group called the Niger Avengers. So we are now going to be joined by our guest, Ifeanyi Ukoha. He's in Abuja. He's an economic consultant and a former banker at the Central Bank of Nigeria. Ifeanyi, thank you very much for joining us live tonight from Abuja on Money Talks. I just want to begin with the Niger Delta Avengers. Putting aside their violent methods, what do you make of their fundamental complaint that they want to see more of the country's oil resources and revenues put into the local communities?
Well, I think Niger Delta Avengers and many of the other militant groups essentially are not really fighting for the development of the Delta, but for themselves, because most of what they make doesn't go to developing the Niger Delta. However, I think the government needs to engage them so that there'll be peace and our oil production can come up in Nigeria.
So you consider them essentially gangsters who are looking to make money for themselves and not for the greater community?
Yes, most of them are just gangsters, but at the same time, they need to be contained, and they have people that influence them and people they can talk to, and government needs to engage these people because getting the oil up is very important for Nigeria.
There was a mention in Fidelis's report earlier, which you may not have been able to hear, that the government has made offers to communities built up around the oil industry. What were those offers, those concessions, and why were they not satisfactory?
Okay, so basically, one of the main things the Niger Delta people are looking for is the amnesty program, which seemed to be very successful, and government cut off funding. So those are the ones that they're agreed on, but there are things like fiscal responsibility. The Niger Delta people want some of their resources to stay in their communities, and that's where they've not quite agreed with the government, you know.
And we have seen apparently close to 50,000 job layoffs from the Nigerian oil industry as a result of these attacks. It must be a devastating blow to these workers and to their families in a country where a good job is quite hard to find.
Oh yes, I totally agree with you. And I also want to point out that the IOCs, their method of engagement of the communities is something that has worsened this problem, because before now they used to go to the community leaders and things like that without directly impacting on the communities. And this has led to a lot of unrest. Now with the job losses and power cuts, things are getting worse in the Niger Delta right now.
Nigeria has been in recession for a while now. Oil output as a result of these attacks has been down by around about a half. How much of the recession is due to what's happening with the oil industry?
Oh, well, the oil industry contributes over 90% in terms of foreign reserves, so it's very key. And you know Nigeria's recession is essentially a shortage of foreign exchange, so that makes oil even more important. So we need to rev up our oil revenues, especially with the downturn in the oil industry and falling prices. So it's very critical to the economy that the oil sector and the Niger Delta issue is resolved.
Ifeanyi Ukoha, thank you very much for joining us tonight from Abuja.